I think it goes to like who that person is as an artist, and you know, your team is a reflection of you.
Yep.
So if you got a lazy ass team that ain't doing shit for you, then you probably got to look at yourself, because they're gonna mimic what you do.
Yep.
So you're the head.
Yep.
You're not the tail. So you got to figure out how you want your team to move. And if your team isn't moving in the way that you want them to, then that means you got to pick up the slack and you got to show them how they should move, because they're following your tone. And as for me, like, I tell people all the time, like, bro, like, be on your shit, bro.
Right.
I'm not, man. I can't stress that enough. If you got to check in on your team and hold their hand and all the rest of that stuff through the process of whatever they're doing, then you probably need a new team.
Right. But to that point, that's why it's so important for artists to be visionaries. Artists have to have a vision.
Right.
You have to. If you don't, you're almost destined to either be
Fact.
a one-hit wonder, or you're just never going to make it, because it's like you can't go into the game and be like, I want to be in the game. And then they're like, okay, well, how are you going to progress forward? I don't know. I just want to be in the game.
Right.
Like, you got to know what it is that you're doing. You have to have goals. You have to have a vision of how you're going to achieve those goals. You have to have checklists of what you're going to do each week, each month, each year to hit each of those goals. Otherwise, you're just literally going to be navigating through the dark. You're not going to know. You're not even going to know which points you hit, because you're not keeping track of the next step. And I think that that's something that is really important to our team. Like, you know what we do every year. At the top of every year, this is January, we always sit down and we're like, what did we do last year that worked? What did we do last year that did not work? How can we correct that?
Facts.
How can we make sure that in the next year we're taking the steps to make sure that we're stepping into the next step? We're not half-stepping our way through the year. And I think it's so important for artists to have those brainstorming sessions with their teams, but also have those silent sessions with yourself to reflect as an artist, because it's also important for that to happen, because if your head's not clear, how can you expect for your team to have a clear vision of what it is you trying to do?
That's true. He's out here singing their own shit.
Right.
Then turning around and blaming everybody but themselves.
But motherfuckers do it.
That's what they be doing.
They
Singing
do
their
it.
own shit and blaming everybody else but themselves. But once again, that's why, like, being a jack of all trades, and like, even if you think about a ship, right? Mm-hmm. You got to understand from head to toe, from what's the shit, from bow to whatever. I don't know the ship terminology, but like basically like whatever that shit is, like, you feel me? From one side of the ship to the other, you got to know what's going on. Every nail, whether or not you got any leaks.
Right.
It's not just about
knowing your vessel.
Right. You got to know the sails. If you have sails, you got to know what's going on with that. Are there holes in them?
Right.
All the rest of that stuff. Like, you got to know from head to toe, because then from there, I mean, you could hear a creak in it and you can know what that sound is. You can know what's going on with it. And it's the same thing when it comes to the mission and what you're trying to achieve as a recording artist. If you have that vision, if you have that mission, then you're going to be able to disseminate that to everybody else that's working around you, and they're going to feel your energy and they're going to thrive off of it.
Energy is important, and I think that a lot of people think that energy is not a big thing, but it's contagious. Just to touch on it, just a tad. Artists cannot be walking around with bad attitudes and think that won't leak on over to your team and everyone else that you're around.
Facts. That's facts.
Motherfuckers have to realize that it's so important to not only have a vision and being a jack of all trades, but giving good energy that comes from the soul and comes from within.
I agree.
And letting that translate and emit out.
I feel like when you're trying to build out a team in general, you got to find people that match what you are. And I mean, you are what you attract anyway. And I mean, in life, we don't always get what we want, but we definitely get what we are. That's for sure.
Right.
Because what you want and what you are potentially could be two completely different things. And a lot of people are blinded to that. They think like, oh man, I want to be a superstar. I want 1 million fans or 3-4 million fans. I want millions of streams. I want this. I want that. Woo woo, all that. But then at the end of the day, like, that's not even what they're putting out. That's not what they're putting out to their team. That's not what they're putting out to their fans or anything like that. So because of that, that's not going to be reciprocated. And I think that also goes back to the whole jack of all trades thing. I mean, that goes back to brainstorming, strategizing, having those goal oriented things that are going on within your team, within the finite structure of what you're doing, so that way it can be seen. Because behind the scenes of everything, it looks like a rat race.
Right.
It's like organized chaos.
Yeah.
And if you're not careful, that organized chaos can become chaos.
Right.